So good evening. I'm proud to be sitting before you representing the police department and going over my 2017 budget, which also includes 911 communications and our EMS unit. So basically 3 businesses in one. I gave each of you a packet, and I would like to just touch upon some highlights of my budget and over the past year before we dive into my budget. Let's talk about overtime. 2015, I became chief July 1st. As of July 1st, in my police department, we had $600,000 in overtime for the first 6 months of 2015. Came in as chief. I did a little bit of control mechanisms, developed a policy. We were basically trending at $1.2 million a year for our overtime rate, which was absolutely staggering for a police department our size. So with some policy change, we brought that in around, I believe, just over $900,000. So it was about $285,000 than what was projected. As a result of those, my personnel, the union, they all came together when we made it work within our agency. I would have been significantly less than that if I had not doubled up my officers throughout the summer with the recent threats to the police officers being ambushed and killed throughout the United States. This year in the 2017 budget, we went even less with our overtime, from $750,000 down to $680,000. And that's a result of, thanks to you, with adding additional officers to our ranks. I was able to backfill a lot of those positions in the patrol division, thereby reducing that overtime rate. So the numbers increased in a patrol, which now an officer, we're not at minimum every single day, so now an officer, when he calls out sick, it doesn't have to be immediately replaced. There's actually a buffer there. Obviously, you know, in this town, we're very lucky with a very low crime rate, and that is a compliment to both our citizens who are actively involved with our town and also my officers who are very proactive out there addressing the complaints and addressing any types of issues. But we still have people dying. We have people dying from car wrecks. We have people dying from heroin overdoses, from drug overdoses. From 2015 through 2016, we had the same amount, basically the same amount, less than 1% difference of car crashes. We had double the amount of fatalities last year. We had 10 people die in our town from traffic accidents, whereas a year before that we had 5. 2 of those accidents resulted in double fatalities. Both of them had alcohol, and both of them were as a result of speed. So we have to do a better job at addressing our traffic safety issues. I made it a priority of my officers at my last department meeting. There's another one next month, whereas basically they're all going to be traffic officers. So we developed some policies and stressed to my supervisors that basically those officers need to address the traffic issues a little more proactively than they normally do. Absolutely. You also have to be aware of the recently passed, as of January 1st, the bail reform. Voters voted on that under a different model, so to say, when they went to the polls and approved it. Basically, it came out now that there's a lot of people being released from custody that would and should have been put in jail. It takes probably twice as long now. Now they're telling us, our prosecutor's office, and their hands are tied, we have to wait 2 hours before we get a response back. It's called a public safety assessment. Anytime we arrest somebody and charge them, we have to run them through what's called a PSA, a public safety assessment, through the state. That could take up to 2 hours. So I would say a normal under 50 disorderly person's marijuana charge, which would take less than an hour to process somebody in our facility. Now they're telling us we have to wait a minimum of 2 hours before that comes back, and then the officer then can proceed in with all the processing. So that's where our specials come in, to get that police officer back out on the road as quickly as possible. Now we're having our SLEO 2s work our jail cells once they get released from training to take that officer now and put him back on the road as quickly as possible while that Class 2 processes that prisoner. I just want to talk about retirees. Last year in 2016, we had 6 officers that retired, obviously all either command level or a patrol officer at top tier pay. In 2016, we lost 6, we gained 8, which I thank you for that. Current sworn now, we're at 86. As you're aware, there's a lot more that's asked upon the police officers nowadays. It's not just their traditional role of answering calls and investigations. Now, obviously, we are expected, and we happily oblige, to get involved in recovery efforts for drug addiction and also mental health. If you look, I also provided you on that budget hearing highlights the status of our police department dating back to 2009 when we were at the highest level of officers. I understand that personnel costs money. I understand that. Hopefully I'm able to justify adding to my ranks, but you can see how we're slowly building back up, back to nearly our 2009 levels, which is my ultimate goal over the next 5 years. And the other big expense is fleet. Last year, I requested $400,000 for vehicles. The final amount appropriated was $200,000, half the amount of patrol cars I was able to obtain, and we lost several vehicles because of accidents, where the officers were not at fault. So our vehicles are hurting as well. This year, I requested the same as last year, despite only receiving half last year. So that's where I'm at right now as far as the highlights. If you would like to talk about anything as far as my personnel requests, allocation of where those officers would go, I'd be more than happy to talk about that.